This is how I absolutely fucked it and gained 20 kilos in just 1 month. Now I'm going to throw in a wee disclaimer here and say that this is very much going to be a storytelling type of video where there's not really going to be much editing or cuts or anything like that. It's just going to be me telling the story of how I basically came out of a bodybuilding diet and fucked it and became a big fat hairy bastard. I went from the best condition I'd ever been in, the best shape that I'd ever been in at that point in time in my life, to a fat hairy bastard in the space of just 4 weeks. And what I'd done to sort of fuck it in a nutshell, but then what I would do differently if I was in that same position now to make sure that that didn't happen again. So I am going to set the scene for you. It was late 2019, so I would have been in my early to mid 20s, somewhere within that range. I had lost a lot of weight by that point. I lost like a bit of body fat. I still wasn't in like good nick, but I had spent 1 year sort of getting into the gym and not really, I wouldn't call it training. It was kind of working out, but it was inconsistent. And then after my first sort of 6 months of doing that, I got help from a PT who then became my coach. And this guy was just basically a massive meathead, bodybuilder. I saw him, I saw heaps of muscle on the screen. I was like, oh, he must know what he's talking about. I know better now. And went to him for help. And basically was like, look, I want to build a heap of muscle. I want to lose a heap of body fat. How do I go about that? So we kind of spent 6 months doing like what I would call a bit of a body recomp now. And but after like I kind of made the decision that I wanted to go into like an extreme sort of fat loss phase, I had built a bit of muscle by that point, but I still had a good chunk of body fat to come off. And what he recommended doing was dieting for a bodybuilding show. There was a local show going on in Aberdeen. Obviously that's where I'm from. And he suggested that it would be a good motivator, a good date or a good deadline to work towards. First red flag, by the way, if someone has never done any kind of diet before, doing a bodybuilding prep for a competition is not a good thing to do. Don't get me wrong, there are people that will be able to do it and do it well. I would make the strong argument that the majority, myself included, will have a very, very shit time doing it, and something will probably go wrong along the way, whether it is before or after the competition. And I am exhibit A of that. So we decided to go. I knew fuck all about bodybuilding, by the way. I didn't follow it. I just knew, I was like, oh, big muscly men that wear budgie smugglers and shave their body and then wear baby oil. And I was like, I just like the thought of, okay, it's a goal, it's a date, it's a deadline. In hindsight, I should have just done something like a photo shoot or whatever, but it sent a rock up my arse. Now, the first issue that we came into here was that he 100% didn't give me enough time. Again, I'm just, at this stage of my life, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I knew about calorie deficit, I knew how many calories were in macronutrients, I knew about energy balance, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't know anything about getting in that kind of condition. And I certainly didn't know how long it would actually take. So 12 to 14 weeks, somewhere within that area, before the competition date, he then started my prep and started dieting me down. But I had a significant amount of body fat to come off, and for someone who didn't have that much muscle mass, was fairly inexperienced, I should have had a lot longer there. Anyway, because I'd never done any kind of like fat loss phase or strict dieting before as such, my relationship with food was really tested throughout this time. And I'm like, one fond memory for me is looking back on that period of time and not cheating on my diet. There were some bleak moments where I had peanut butter in my diet. Peanut butter is also a trigger food for me, or at least it was, sorry. And I have a very vivid memory of getting to a point in that diet where I'm very lean, I'm tired, I'm starving, I'm like, my sex drive is fucking gone. Everything's just shit. I'm just kind of ticking the boxes and taking it one day at a time. And I remember going to my kitchen cupboard, taking out a jar of peanut butter and literally sitting on the floor of my living room and crying into it. Like a way to cheat on my diet, then feeling so shit about myself about doing that I just started greeting. And like bawling my eyes out and just, not bawling, that's a bit dramatic, but I was crying anyway. And I like threw it away, and then I I ate some lettuce instead and just got on with my day. And I was like, okay, over and done with that moment. Let's crack on. By the way, I'm going to laugh about some of these moments that sound they sound a bit grim. I'm laughing about it because like my relationship with food is completely transformed since that moment in my life. And I can look back on it and I learned a lot. I learned how to handle things differently. I learned a certain level of like resiliency and commitment, etc. But there are some moments in there where like, fucking hell, that was grim. And kind of looking back, I wish I kind of knew what I know now and how I handle things now. I wish I could handle them the same way back then, because it would have been a lot more plain sailing, let's just say, and a lot less dramatic. I was going to say traumatic, but it was more dramatic on my part. Anyway, I think it got to 3 weeks before the date of the competition, and then big COVID hit and everything went into lockdown, everything was shutting down, and they obviously cancelled all the shows. And I basically spoke to my coach and I was like, well, what do I do? Like, I'm not sure. You tell me. Like, do I just continue eating the food I'm eating? And he was like, his words literally were, just eat what you want. There's no competition anymore. And I was like, obviously anyone who kind of knows anything, that's shit advice, like shocking advice. So I kind of read that and I was like, oh, sound, I'm fucking starving. I want this, that, the next thing. I have got a list on my phone of about a dozen different things I want to eat right now. But the first thing, that was, I forget what day it was. I remember being at work and then going home, getting changed, having a gym session, doing cardio, and then having like a decent meal for my dinner. But then I also remember the following day speaking to him and asking, oh, my nan's invited me for a Sunday roast round at hers. Is it okay if I go and have this off-plan meal? And he was like, mate, you're not in prep anymore. Do what the fuck you want. And that was the last time that we spoke, because any kind of messages that I asked after that were just getting completely aired and completely ghosted until like months later, where I guess he was back to work or something. I'm not too sure. But during that time where I was kind of just left to my own devices and I had no idea about reverse dieting or how to increase my calories, I went fucking AWOL. My relationship with food wasn't the best. It was pretty appalling. I was hungry, I was tired, I had fucking cravings I didn't know how to handle. I didn't even know what to do with my normal food. So I went to town on anything and everything. And I'm talking, I made a tray of brownies because I had all this free time because we're in lockdown. I was craving shit food and I wanted to try baking because everyone was kind of doing that at that moment in time because everyone had an abundance of free time. So I tried baking. And I remember eating an entire tray of brownies for my breakfast. I remember having Häagen-Dazs for my breakfast. I remember having 4 different digestive biscuits. We're doing these like limited edition flavors. There was like lemon drizzle, brownie, strawberry cheesecake, and sticky toffee pudding, I think it was. I had those 4 packets all at once. And basically this kind of went on every single day for the best part of a month before I had gained so much water weight that I couldn't even go for a walk because my cankles had basically swollen up like a balloon. And my lower back was pumped as well, just because the amount of water that was being sort of trapped in the muscle was then pressing against the nerves in my lower back. So it was basically just agony. Same with my calves. And anyone who's maybe like dieted and then had like a Chinese or something and maybe feel puffy, it's like that but times 20. Your body is so sensitive and so depleted of glycogen and water, etc., that you eat all of this food and it just soaks it up like a sponge to the point where you are just a water balloon. You're a fucking water buffalo is what I like to call it, and it disables you. And it was one of these things where I couldn't put a lid on it. I couldn't stop. I was just a bottomless pit of just eating and eating and eating. And anyone who's gotten in that kind of shape and has maybe fucked it once or twice, maybe not to that extent, but has fucked it in general, will know that when you are that lean and you are that depleted, you're an unhealthy level of body fat, and your body's and your brain is very much aware of that, and it's telling you to eat right fucking now so you can get to a healthy body fat percentage, in a nutshell, to just support health and not die, in a nutshell. So the hunger signaling that your body and your brain will normally have to tell you to stop eating and that you're full doesn't exist. So you just eat and eat and eat and eat to the point, and that doesn't stop. That hunger is still there to the point where you literally have to be sick. And I came close to that quite a few times, but it eventually got to a point where I was speaking to like a good friend of mine who was in a similar situation. But he had done a prep, and he was prepping for the same show, and this wasn't his first rodeo though, so he handled it a lot better and didn't fuck it half as bad as I did. But we were speaking, and he was having a bit of water retention, a bit blown. He was like, yeah, mate, you need to stop now. You need to put a lid on it. So the fact that I couldn't even go for a walk was a sign to me. I was like, this needs to stop. Like, this obviously can't continue. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, this isn't just bloat anymore. This is, I'm fat again. I've literally just undone months of graft in the space of a few weeks. Like, I royally fucked this. So what I did is I put myself back into like, I spent that lockdown just learning about nutrition, in a nutshell, with the inspiration of sorting myself out. I learned about like what to do with certain macros, all the macros, what to do with calories, what to do in this situation as well. And I was like, right, I need to have myself on a high amount of food that I'm somewhat satiated and have a certain amount of energy, but it's still in a calorie deficit and I can still get the water off. I was literally walking on the spot in my flat because that was the only form of exercise that I was physically capable of. Until I had shifted a good amount of water to the point where I could go outside. It was really nice weather during that time, so I'd walk like all the fucking time. I didn't have access to a gym, obviously there was shut or any kind of equipment at home, so I would just do body weighted exercises at the park until it got to the point where I got myself back in reasonably decent shape again. And I think that took me somewhere between like 4 and 6 months. So 12 to 14 weeks of graft were basically undone in the space of 3 to 4 weeks. It then took me another 4 to 6 weeks to then clot back again. Now, things that I would do differently coming out of that deficit and coming out of that fat loss phase, the thing that really fucked me over was the lack of awareness, the lack of understanding, the lack of knowledge. If I had a coach that wasn't a total dickhead and didn't just ghost me, I think I would have been fine because I would have known what to have done with my food. In hindsight now, the first thing that I would have done is just bumped my food right back up to maintenance. I am an unhealthy level of body fat. I don't need to be this lean because there's no competition. I'm absolutely starving and I feel like shit. If I can find that middle ground of eating enough food that keeps me a little, being satiated when you're in that condition is not really a thing, but just to the point where I'm not thinking about food all day, every day. But most importantly, I've got a bit of life back in me, okay? So get my food back up to maintenance, get some life back into me, get some energy back into me, and not just be absolutely obsessing about food all day, every day. That would be the number one thing that I would do coming out of that kind of fat loss phase or that deficit. Second thing that I would be doing, and this is maybe not relevant to everyone, but it certainly is to anyone who's got a questionable relationship with food, I would be fucking off any kind of foods that are trigger foods. So like I mentioned, the peanut butter was a trigger food for me. I would be getting that so far to fuck. I would be keeping that away and I would be replacing that with something that I know I'm not going to binge. Like 90% dark chocolate that's a like for like kind of unsaturated fat source. The likelihood of me binging on dark chocolate that's that bitter is a lot less likely than it is with something like peanut butter. Anything else that I've got in the fridge where I'm like or in the kitchen, I'm thinking, I can maybe work this into my calories or X, Y, and Z. I would actually just be removing that altogether during that period of time. And I would just be filling my fridge, my cupboards, my entire kitchen, everything with just clean foods that I'm not thinking of binging on. So literally I say oats. I've had a binge in the past with oats when I was younger. So that's maybe not a good example, but I would have oats in there, I would have eggs in there, I would have chicken in there, I'd have rice in there, I'd have pasta in there, things that require me to cook them rather than they're just readily available. Things that are in packets and you can take it out and then they're good to go, you're 10 times more likely to just binge on them or overeat on them or just stuff your face with them. However, if you have to take the time to prepare foods and actually cook them and go through that process of cooking them, there is a period of time in between there where you can call yourself out and you can snap out of it and be like, what the fuck am I doing here? Third and final thing that I would be doing if I had the opportunity to do so, obviously in my circumstance during that time I didn't really, but I would be keeping my energy and my expenditure pretty damn high. I think a lot of mistakes that people make when they come out of a calorie deficit is they maybe just significantly reduce the amount of cardio they're doing, or like half the amount of steps that they're doing, or even like reduce the amount of gym sessions they're doing. I would be keeping all those things relatively high to the point where my recovery can actually keep up with them. So like, I will use myself as an example here, and I'm going to use it with the hypothetical that I came out of that diet and the gyms weren't closed because of lockdown. I was training 5 times a week. I was doing 2 hours of cardio a day, 1 hour in the Stairmaster after I trained, and then 1 later in the evening. And I was doing somewhere between like 12 and 15,000 steps every single day and poverty calories, okay? That is obviously a lot. Now, if I just went from that to doing half of that, the weight is gonna fucking skyrocket, okay? So in that circumstance, probably what I would be doing is just halving the cardio and taking the steps down like below 10,000. That's still quite a lot of expenditure, but you still feel fit, you still keep the routine, you still keep a little bit of like that kind of dieting commitment, if that makes sense. You don't just sort of sack it all off and let everything fall to pot. You're still keeping a good level of expenditure. Your food is going to go up, so you're utilizing that a little bit more efficiently. You still feel fit. You don't feel as watery. Your scale weight won't skyrocket. And I think most importantly, like I said, like you keep that dieting routine in place as well. And just an added one, because I've kind of just thought about it now that I've just mentioned that third point. That routine that you had when you were dieting and trying to lose the body fat, keep that in play as much as you possibly can. Whether you are doing, like, if you're doing your cardio at the same time every day, or you're training at the same time every day, you're going for walks at the same time every day, you're doing meal prep at the same time every day, people become a lot more regimented when they're trying to lose body fat, and they become a lot more consistent with their day-to-day scheduling and what their week looks like. The more consistent you can keep that transitioning out of a fat loss phase and going into whatever kind of phase next, the more successful I believe you're going to be, because you will treat it like you're still dieting, like you're still losing body fat, and you will still be somewhat as strict with yourself. And like, we've all got a little bit of the tism, and keeping that routine in place as much as possible, I think, is the key to success. But yeah, that is the unfortunate, I think it's pretty funny now looking back on it, to be honest. I'm being very dramatic saying it's unfortunate, because it's not a laughing matter, but it fucking is at the same time. I can laugh about it. I enjoy telling the story because I think there's definitely something to be learned from it. As I said, it happened over half a decade ago. I've learned a lot since then. I've grown a lot since then. I know 110%, like hand on heart, that same thing wouldn't happen again. So it's good to share that experience with whoever might benefit from it, or even just have a laugh at it as well at the same time. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that video. If you got a laugh from it at any point in my misfortune, or you felt you benefited from it anyway, you learned something, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next one.